Somewhere in the Canadian Rockies, a highway bends toward the sky and vanishes into a wall of glacial ice. Canada is the second largest country on Earth. 90% of its land remains untouched, unbuilt, wild, and most travelers never see any of it. The real Canada is not found in its cities, it is found on its roads. Roads that cut through ancient rainforests older than most civilizations. Roads where glaciers as thick as the Eiffel Tower is tall creep toward the pavement. A gravel highway that crosses the Arctic Circle. Tides that move more water than every river on the planet combined. And at the very edge of Newfoundland, a road that ends at a Viking settlement built 500 years before Columbus ever set sail. This journey crosses 12 of Canada's most breathtaking drives, over 10,000 kilometers from the Pacific to the Atlantic and all the way to the Arctic Ocean. From fjords to badlands, from desert vineyards to ancient forests, from the ocean floor to the edge of the known world. The engine starts, the horizon opens, and Canada begins to reveal what it has been hiding in plain sight. The Pacific Ocean is still visible in the rearview mirror when the mountains begin. Highway 99 leaves Vancouver heading north, and within minutes the city's skyline disappears behind a curtain of coastal peaks. This is the Sea-to-Sky Highway, and it wastes no time proving why it earned that name. The road hugs the edge of Howe Sound, a body of water that cuts deep into the coast mountains. Geologists have confirmed that Howe Sound is the southernmost fjord in North America. A fjord, not a bay, not an inlet, a genuine glacially carved fjord, just 30 minutes from downtown Vancouver. Most people driving this road have no idea they are passing through a geological formation that took over 10,000 years to create. The water below shimmers between deep green and slate blue depending on the light. Across the sound, granite walls rise hundreds of meters straight from the waterline. Eagles circle above the cliffs, and the road keeps climbing. Shannon Falls appears without warning, a 335-meter cascade of white water pouring down a rock face so sheer it looks like the mountain itself is weeping. It is the third tallest waterfall in British Columbia, and travelers can hear its roar from the highway before they ever see it. But the real transformation happens further north. Past the old mining town of Britannia Beach, the landscape begins to shift. The coastal rainforest gives way to alpine terrain. The air changes. Douglas fir and western red cedar are gradually replaced by mountain hemlock and subalpine meadows. The elevation gain is so dramatic that drivers essentially travel through 3 distinct ecosystems in under 2 hours. By the time the road reaches Squamish, the granite monolith of the Stowamas Chief rises over 700 meters above the valley floor. Rock climbers from around the world travel here to scale its face. And beyond Squamish, the highway continues to rise, winding through old-growth forest corridors and past glacier-fed rivers until it reaches Whistler, a resort village nestled in a valley between 2 massive mountain ranges. The sea-to-sky highway covers just 120 kilometers, but in that short distance, it compresses an entire world of geology, ecology, and raw Pacific beauty into a single unforgettable drive. And this is only the beginning, because Vancouver Island holds a road that leads somewhere even more ancient. A ferry crosses the Strait of Georgia, and the world changes. Vancouver Island is the largest island on the west coast of North America, and Highway 4, the Pacific Rim Highway, is the only road that crosses its mountainous spine to reach the wild outer coast. What begins as a quiet two-lane road through farmland near the town of Parksville quickly turns into something far more primal. The forest closes in, and not just any forest. This is temperate rainforest, one of the rarest ecosystems on the planet. Enormous western red cedars, some over 800 years old, tower above a floor carpeted in emerald moss and fern. The canopy is so thick that sunlight barely reaches the ground. Ecologists have documented that these forests receive more rainfall per year than almost any place in North America. Some areas see over 3,000 millimeters annually. The result is a living cathedral of green that feels closer to a primordial jungle than anything travelers expect to find in Canada. The road turns through Cathedral Grove, a protected old-growth stand inside Macmillan Provincial Park. Some of the Douglas firs here are over 800 years old and stand more than 70 meters tall. They were already ancient when European explorers first arrived on this coast. Walking among them is like stepping into a world that existed long before human memory. Beyond the forest, the highway descends toward the coast, and when the Pacific finally appears, it arrives with force. Long Beach stretches for 16 kilometers of wild, unbroken sand, battered by waves that have traveled thousands of kilometers across open ocean. Surfers in thick wetsuits ride swells in water that rarely climbs above 10 degrees. Storm watchers gather in winter to witness waves that crash with enough power to shake the ground. The road ends at Tofino, a small community perched on the edge of the continent. There is quite literally nothing between Tofino and Japan but open Pacific water. It is the kind of place that reminds travelers how small they are, and how wild Canada remains when you leave the highways behind. But the Pacific coast is only one face of British Columbia, just inland. Beyond the mountains, the province reveals something no one expects: a desert and a valley filled with wine. Canada has a desert. Most people do not believe it until they see it. Drive east from the coast, cross the Cascade Mountains, and the landscape undergoes a transformation so complete it feels like arriving in a different country. The rain-soaked forests vanish, the air turns dry and hot, and stretching across the valley floor near the town of Osoyoos Sagebrush and prickly pear cactus grow in sandy soil beneath a sun that blazes for over 2,000 hours a year. This is the northern tip of the Great Basin Desert, the same arid system that extends through Washington, Oregon, and Nevada. And running through the heart of it is one of the most surprising scenic drives in all of Canada. The Okanagan Valley stretches over 250 kilometers from north to south, anchored by the shimmering expanse of Okanagan Lake. The drive along Highway 97 passes through a rolling landscape of vineyards, orchards, and sun-baked benchlands that bear no resemblance to the Canada of popular imagination. Over 200 wineries line this valley today. The combination of volcanic soil, intense summer heat, and cool nights descending from the surrounding mountains creates conditions that rival the great wine regions of France and California. Travelers who arrive expecting frozen wilderness find themselves instead sipping bold reds on sunlit terraces overlooking a lake that stretches to the horizon. Among the most remarkable stops is Untamed Cellars near Osoyoos, recognized as the first indigenous-owned winery in North America. It sits on the land of the Osoyoos Indian Band, and the neighboring Untamed Desert Cultural Center offers visitors a chance to walk through this fragile desert ecosystem and learn from the people who have called it home for thousands of years. Further north, the valley softens. Peach orchards and cherry farms line the road between Penticton and Kelowna. The Naramata Bench, a narrow strip of land between the lake and the mountains, is packed with boutique wineries producing small batch wines that have earned international recognition. The Okanagan is the warm, golden pause in this journey, a reminder that Canada's diversity extends far beyond ice and forest. But the ice is coming, because east of here the Rocky Mountains are waiting, and within them lies a road that many consider the most beautiful on the entire planet. This is the one. If there is a single drive in Canada that stops travelers in their tracks and forces them to pull over simply because the view is too overwhelming to experience in motion, it is this one. The Icefields Parkway runs 232 kilometers along Highway 93 between Lake Louise and Jasper. Condé Nast Traveler and National Geographic have both named it one of the top 10 drives in the world, and those rankings only begin to capture what this road delivers. From the moment the highway leaves Lake Louise, the scale becomes almost incomprehensible. Turquoise lakes appear around nearly every bend, their impossible color created by glacial rock flour suspended in meltwater. Bow Lake is the first to take travelers' breath away, framed by rugged peaks with the Bow Glacier visible at its far edge. This is also the headwater of the Bow River, which flows all the way through Banff and Calgary. Further north, Peyto Lake emerges, Its vivid blue surface, shaped like the head of a wolf when seen from above, has become one of the most photographed lakes in the Canadian Rockies. But nothing prepares travelers for the Columbia Icefield. This massive body of ice is the largest icefield in the Canadian Rockies. At its thickest point, it measures roughly the height of the Eiffel Tower. The Athabasca Glacier, which flows from the icefield toward the highway, is the most visited glacier in North America, and it is visibly retreating. Markers along the access road show where the glacier's edge stood in previous decades. The distance between those markers tells a story that needs no narration. Nearby, the glacier skywalk extends over a glass-floored platform 280 meters above the Sunwapta Valley, offering views that make the scale of the Rockies feel both magnificent and humbling. The parkway continues north past Sunwapta Falls and Athabasca Falls, where the raw power of glacial meltwater carves through ancient rock. Wildlife is everywhere. Bighorn sheep graze along the roadside. Elk wander through meadows. Black bears and occasionally grizzlies appear at the forest edge. There is no cell phone service for most of this drive, and travelers consistently say that is part of its magic. The Icefields Parkway is the centerpiece of this journey, but Alberta has another face entirely, one that is 75 million years older. The glaciers disappear, the mountains flatten, and the earth cracks open to reveal a world that vanished 66 million years ago. The Dinosaur Trail is a loop drive through the town of Drumheller and the surrounding Canadian Badlands in central Alberta, and it is one of the most visually disorienting drives in the country. After the towering peaks of the Rockies, the landscape here feels alien. Eroded canyons, striped sedimentary cliffs, and strange mushroom-shaped rock columns called hoodoos stretch in every direction. The ground is dry, exposed, and ancient. This is one of the richest dinosaur fossil beds on Earth. Paleontologists have been excavating this region for over a century, and the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller houses one of the world's largest collections of dinosaur specimens. Over 160,000 fossils have been catalogued from the surrounding formations. Species discovered here include the mighty Albertosaurus and dozens of hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and marine reptiles from a time when this dry prairie was a subtropical coastal swamp. The hoodoos themselves are natural sculptures carved by wind and rain over millennia. Some stand over 7 meters tall, their harder capstones protecting the softer rock beneath. They look like sentinels guarding a prehistoric world. Driving the loop, the road crosses the Red Deer River on the Blériot Ferry, one of the last remaining cable ferries in Alberta. It is a small, quiet moment in a landscape that otherwise feels enormous. But Alberta has one more surprise. Back near Jasper, Maligne Lake Road offers a completely different experience. This short scenic drive winds through the mountains to Maligne Lake, one of the most photographed lakes in the Rockies. The water is glacier-fed, impossibly blue, and surrounded by peaks that reflect perfectly on calm mornings. Spirit Island, a tiny forested island near the lake's far end, has become one of Canada's most iconic images. Two drives, two Albertas, one that reaches 75 million years into the past, and one that feels like it was carved by the gods yesterday morning. Now the road turns north, toward a highway that was built during a world war, through some of the most untamed wilderness on the continent. In March of 1942, the world was at war, and the United States military faced a problem that seemed impossible. Alaska was vulnerable. Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor just months earlier, and the American territory had no overland supply route connecting it to the rest of the continent. The only way to move troops and equipment was by sea or air, both of which were exposed to enemy attack. The solution was audacious: build a highway through some of the most remote and hostile terrain in North America, through mountain ranges, river valleys, permafrost, and muskeg swamps, and build it fast. Over 16,000 soldiers and civilian workers were deployed. Among them were 3 African-American regiments who labored under brutal conditions that history has only recently begun to fully acknowledge. In just 8 months, they carved a road through nearly 2,700 kilometers of raw wilderness, from Dawson Creek in British Columbia to Delta Junction in Alaska. Engineers at the time compared the achievement to the construction of the Panama Canal. Today, the Alaska Highway stretches 2,232 kilometers and is fully paved, but it has lost none of its wildness. The drive passes through landscapes that shift from boreal forest to alpine tundra, from river valleys flanked by snow-capped peaks to vast stretches where the road is the only human mark on the land. One of the most stunning sections passes Muncho Lake in northern British Columbia. The lake's vivid turquoise color comes from high mineral content in the water, and the highway follows its shoreline for 12 kilometers, with the northern Rockies towering on both sides. Further north, Liard River Hot Springs offers travelers a surreal pause. Natural hot springs steam in a clearing surrounded by boreal forest. Temperatures reach over 50 degrees Celsius, and the pools have been used for centuries by indigenous peoples long before the highway existed. In the Yukon, the highway passes Kluane National Park and Reserve, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that contains some of the largest non-polar ice fields on Earth. The park is roughly half the size of Switzerland, and most of it has never been explored on foot. The Alaska Highway was born from wartime urgency, but it became something far greater. a corridor through the last true wilderness of the north. From here, one road goes even further, into a world beyond the Arctic Circle. There are roads, and then there is the Dempster. "740 kilometers of unpaved gravel stretching from near Dawson City in the Yukon to Inuvik in the Northwest Territories. No traffic lights, no towns, one gas station in the middle at Eagle Plains, 370 kilometers from the start. And a landscape so vast and empty that travelers report feeling like they have driven off the edge of the known world. The Dempster Highway is Canada's only all-season public road that crosses the Arctic Circle. Construction began in 1959 and was not completed until 1979. The road is built on a gravel berm that insulates the permafrost below. Without it, the road would melt into the earth. The journey begins at Tombstone Territorial Park, where jagged granite peaks rise above vast tundra valleys. The park's namesake mountain resembles a gravestone, and the surrounding landscape is part of ancient Beringia, the land bridge region that was never covered by glaciers during the last ice age. This means the terrain here has been exposed and evolving for tens of thousands of years longer than most of North America. Further north, the road climbs through the Ogilvie Mountains and descends into the Richardson Range. The tundra stretches to the horizon in every direction. In autumn, it turns vivid crimson and gold. In summer, the sun does not set. Travelers driving on the solstice can watch it dip toward the horizon and then climb back into the sky without ever disappearing. Wildlife is abundant and unbothered by humans. Grizzly bears forage along the roadside. Dall sheep perch on rocky slopes. And the porcupine caribou herd, one of the largest migratory herds in the world, crosses the highway during seasonal migrations numbering in the tens of thousands. At Eagle Plains, travelers cross into the Northwest Territories. 2 river crossings by ferry carry vehicles over the Peel and the Mackenzie, rivers so wide they feel more like inland seas. Since 2017, a new highway extends from Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk, a hamlet on the shore of the Arctic Ocean. Travelers can now drive from southern Canada all the way to the edge of the Polar Sea. This is the most remote chapter of this journey, and one of the most unforgettable drives on the planet. But now the road turns east, toward a quieter kind of wilderness, a forest of 2,000 lakes and autumn fire. The Arctic is behind, the mountains are behind, and now the road enters a forest so dense and so alive that it feels like driving through the lungs of the continent. Highway 60 passes through the heart of Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario. The park covers nearly 7,700 square kilometers of mixed forest, and this single highway corridor is the only paved road that penetrates its interior. Everything else is accessed by canoe, portage trail, or foot. Algonquin holds over 2,400 lakes. That number is not a misprint. 2,400 individual bodies of water hidden beneath a canopy of maple, birch, pine, and spruce. Many of them have never been named. Some have never been paddled. In summer, the park hums with life. Moose wade through shallow lakes at dawn, their silhouettes reflected in perfectly still water. Loons call across the bays in a sound so haunting, it has become the unofficial voice of the Canadian wilderness. Beavers build their lodges along nearly every waterway. But it is autumn that transforms Highway 60 into something legendary. In October, the sugar maples turn first. Deep orange and crimson spread across the hillsides like slow fire. Then the birches follow in brilliant gold. The entire park ignites. Travelers who have driven scenic routes on every continent report that Algonquin in fall is among the most vivid natural color displays on Earth. The Group of Seven, Canada's most celebrated landscape painters, drew deep inspiration from this region. Tom Thomson, whose work preceded and influenced the group, painted many of his most famous canvases in and around Algonquin. His paintings captured the raw emotional power of these forests. And standing on the shore of one of these lakes in October, watching the color reflect off the water, it becomes clear that he barely had to exaggerate. At night, the park offers something else entirely. Algonquin is famous for its public wolf howls, organized events where park naturalists lead groups into the forest and howl into the darkness. When the wolves answer, the sound rises from deep in the trees and rolls across the lakes. It is primal, it is electric, and it reminds every listener that this land still belongs to the wild. Highway 60 is a short drive, but its power is immense. And the next road follows something even larger, the shore of the biggest freshwater lake on Earth. There are lakes, and then there is Superior. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake on the planet by surface area. It covers over 82,000 square kilometers. It holds 10% of all the surface fresh water on Earth. And when storms roll across its surface, waves can reach heights of over 9 meters. Sailors have long treated it with the same respect they give the open ocean. The Trans-Canada Highway follows Superior's northern shore through Lake Superior Provincial Park, and this stretch of road is one of the most underrated scenic drives in the country. The landscape is defined by the Canadian Shield, one of the oldest geological formations on Earth. Exposed Precambrian rock, some of it over 2 billion years old, lines the highway in smooth, rounded forms that have been shaped by ice, wind, and water since long before complex life existed. The lake appears and disappears as the road winds through the shield. One moment it is a distant shimmer through the pines, the next it fills the entire horizon, deep blue and seemingly endless. Travelers often stop simply to stand at the shore and listen. The sound of Superior's waves hitting ancient rock has a rhythm that feels older than time. One of the most significant stops along this drive is Agawa Rock, where a short trail leads to a cliff face covered in Ojibwe pictographs. Painted in red ochre, the images depict canoes, serpents, and spiritual figures. Archaeologists believe some of these paintings are over 150 years old, though oral traditions suggest the site has been sacred for far longer. The pictographs are only accessible when the lake is calm, because the trail runs along the waterline. When Superior is rough, the waves make the approach dangerous. The Trans-Canada through this region is the road that holds the country together. It is the connective tissue between eastern and western Canada, and for much of its length through Ontario, it runs as a single two-lane highway through wilderness. There are stretches where drivers will not pass another vehicle for 30 minutes or more. This is not a drive of spectacle. It is a drive of magnitude. The sheer age of the rock, the enormity of the water, the silence of the boreal forest pressing in from both sides. And now the road continues east, toward a place where the ocean itself performs the most dramatic act of nature on the planet. Twice every day, the Bay of Fundy performs an act so powerful it bends the land. "100 billion tons of seawater surge into the bay with the incoming tide. That is not a rough estimate. Oceanographers have measured it. In a single tidal cycle, the Bay of Fundy moves more water than the combined flow of every freshwater river on Earth. And then, roughly 6 hours later, it all drains back out. The tidal range at the head of the bay, near the Minas Basin in Nova Scotia, reaches up to 16 meters. That is the height of a 5-story building. Boats that float level with the dock at high tide sit stranded on the ocean floor just hours later. The Guinness Book of World Records has recognized these as the highest tides on the planet. The Fundy Coastal Drive follows the New Brunswick shoreline of this extraordinary bay, and every stop along the way reveals a different expression of tidal power. At the Hopewell Rocks, massive stone formations known as flower pots rise from the beach at low tide. Visitors walk on the ocean floor among these towering pillars, sculpted over thousands of years by the relentless carving of salt water. Return a few hours later, and the same formations are submerged nearly to their treetops. Kayakers paddle where hikers stood just that morning. The science behind these tides is a matter of resonance. The Bay of Fundy's funnel shape and depth create a natural oscillation period of approximately 12 hours. This happens to match almost exactly the rhythm of the ocean's tidal cycle. The result is a kind of amplification effect. The water sloshes back and forth in sync with the gravitational pull of the moon, growing more extreme with each cycle. Tidal bores push up the rivers that feed the bay, reversing the flow of water and creating standing waves that surfers have ridden for nearly 30 kilometers. The Mi'kmaq, who have lived along these shores for centuries, attributed the tides to the mythical giant Glooskap, who wanted to take a bath. The Fundy coast is a reminder that the most powerful forces in nature are not always found in the mountains. Sometimes they hide in the rhythm of the sea, and the next road follows that sea northward, along a cliff-lined coast where three cultures have left their mark on the wind. The first thing travelers notice on the Cabot Trail is the silence, not the absence of sound. The opposite, a silence made of wind, crashing waves, and birdsong so layered it creates a kind of natural music that seems to rise from the landscape itself. The Cabot Trail is a 298-kilometer loop around the northern tip of Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. It is named after the Italian explorer John Cabot, who is believed to have landed on this coast in 1497. But this island story begins long before European contact. The Mi'kmaq people have inhabited Cape Breton for over 10,000 years, and their presence, alongside Acadian and Scottish Gaelic communities, gives the island a cultural richness that is woven into every village along the route. The road climbs and falls with the terrain, hugging dramatic coastal cliffs on one side and plunging into forested valleys on the other. About 1/3 of the trail passes through Cape Breton Highlands National Park, where the landscape shifts between boreal plateau and rugged Atlantic coastline. The Skyline Trail is perhaps the most famous stop, a moderate hiking path that leads to a headland overlooking the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where the cliff drops away and the ocean stretches to the horizon in every direction. Moose are frequently spotted grazing along the trail, unbothered by the hikers passing through. On the western coast between Cheticamp and Pleasant Bay, the road winds along some of the most dramatic cliff scenery in eastern Canada. The village of Cheticamp itself is a vibrant Acadian fishing community known for its hooked rug tradition and French-speaking culture. On the eastern side, the road passes through the Lone Shieling, the only place in the park where visitors can walk beneath old-growth Acadian hardwood forest. Some of the maple and beech trees here are over 350 years old. They stand at the northernmost limit of their habitat, protected because this stand of ancient forest is among the last of its kind in the maritime provinces. The Cabot Trail can be driven in a day, but seasoned travelers insist it deserves at least 3. Every bend reveals a new coastline, a new community, a new reason to slow down. And now the journey reaches its final chapter, a road that leads to the very edge of the continent and 1,000 years into the past. Route 430 begins at Deer Lake and heads north, and the further it goes, the further back in time it travels. This is the Viking Trail, 433 kilometers of coastal highway running the length of Newfoundland's Great Northern Peninsula to L'Anse aux Meadows, the only confirmed Viking settlement in North America. But the road's wonders begin long before the Norse ruins appear. Gros Morne National Park is the first revelation. This UNESCO World Heritage Site earned its designation not for its beauty, though it is staggeringly beautiful, but for what it revealed about the planet itself. The tablelands, a flat-topped massif of rust-colored rock, is composed of peridotite, rock from the Earth's mantle, normally found deep beneath the crust, pushed to the surface by ancient tectonic forces. Geologists who studied this formation in the 1960s found evidence that helped prove the theory of plate tectonics. The rock here is so inhospitable that almost nothing grows on it. Walking across the tablelands feels like walking on another planet. Deeper into the park, Western Brook Pond awaits. The name is misleading. This is a landlocked fjord carved by glaciers, with sheer cliff walls rising over 600 meters on both sides. Boat tours carry visitors into the gorge, where waterfalls cascade from the plateau above, and the scale of the landscape defies description. North of Gros Morne, the highway enters increasingly remote territory. Fishing villages dot the coastline. Icebergs, ancient chunks of Greenland's glaciers, drift past the shore during spring and early summer. Whales surface in the bays. The landscape is raw, windswept, and utterly beautiful. And then, at the very tip of the peninsula, the road arrives at L'Anse aux Meadows. In the early 1960s, researchers used clues from the Icelandic sagas to locate the remains of a Norse settlement dating to approximately the year 1000. Sod-walled buildings, iron-working tools, and everyday artifacts confirmed that Vikings had lived here 5 centuries before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. Around 90 people once inhabited this remote settlement, using it as a base for expeditions deeper into the continent. Today, reconstructed sod buildings stand on the windswept meadow overlooking the bay. The ruins of the originals lie just meters away. It is quiet. The wind carries the sound of waves, and standing here, at the edge of the known world, it becomes clear that this was never the end of a journey. It was the beginning of one. "12 drives, 10,000 kilometers, a country that reveals itself not all at once, but one road at a time." The journey began where the Pacific crashed against coastal mountains, and it crossed through ancient rainforests where trees have stood for 8 centuries. It passed through a desert that most people do not believe exists, and climbed into glacial landscapes so vast they made the highway look like a thread laid across the sky. It followed a wartime highway built through impossible terrain by 16,000 workers in 8 months. It crossed the Arctic Circle on a gravel road where the sun does not set. It drove through a forest of 2,000 lakes that erupts into flame every October. It stood on the shore of the largest freshwater lake on Earth and listened to waves that sounded like the ocean. It walked on the floor of a bay where the highest tides on the planet rise and fall with the pull of the moon. It traced a highland coastline where 3 cultures have sung, fished and told stories for centuries. And it ended at a windswept meadow in Newfoundland where Viking explorers once built their homes 1,000 years before the modern world found them. Canada does not reveal its greatest treasures to those who stay in the cities. It saves them for the ones who follow the road, the ones willing to round the next bend, to pull over at the unmarked lookout, to stand in silence and let the land speak. Because that is the secret of these 12 drives. They are not just routes through geography, they are routes through time, through geological epochs, through human history, through the slow and magnificent unfolding of a country that has always been here, waiting to be seen. The highway stretches forward. The horizon never ends, and there is always one more road.